Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University. School of Education, SOE. Diploma in Elementary Education, DELED, English BES 002 Teaching, Learning and Assessment. Block -1 Teaching and Learning at Elementary Level. Unit-1 Understanding Teaching and Learning. 1.1 Introduction. It is a well-known fact that a child acquires a lot of knowledge and learns a lot of skills, attitudes, manners from his/her mother, father, brother, sister, and grandparents. All of them teach the child basic knowledge, skills and attitudes required of living a good life. In this process, the role of the mother is very crucial and prominent in shaping the values of the child. Therefore, it is said, mother is the first teacher of the child. When the child moves from family and neighborhood to a formal school, he or she is exposed to a different kind of learning environments. In the school, he or she learns from teachers, peers and others. He or she is taught by the teacher with new learning experiences in different subjects like mathematics, language, social sciences, etc. Apart from gaining learning experiences in subject areas, she/he acquires new learning experiences through sports, picnics, group works, project works, etc. Therefore, teaching and learning are closely interrelated to each other. Although you have some understanding of these concepts, in this unit, we will discuss the pedagogic understanding of these concepts, relationship between them and the different ways through which the students learn the subjects at elementary level. 1.2 Objectives. After going through this unit, you will be able to define teaching, spell out the various characteristics of teaching, explain teaching as facilitation of learning, highlight the relationship of teaching with learning and learner, point out the relationship between learner and learning, define child-centered approach to teaching learning, spell out the characteristics of child-centered approach to teaching learning, explain how to integrate children's voices and experiences in the teaching learning process, suggest ways to bring in active participation of learners in classroom activities, explain the concept of learning, describe the nature of learning, explain learning as development of knowledge, skills and attitudes, and enlist and explain the different ways through which learners learn. 1.3 Concept and nature of teaching. Teaching is a familiar term to all of us, although the term is generally associated with the schooling process, but one can find the act of teaching in many places. In the family, parents teach children many things about good habits right from the childhood. In the neighborhood, elders teach children many things related to community living. In schools, teachers teach students not only different subjects, but also many things which are essential to be good citizens and lead a productive social life. Teaching taking place in family and neighborhood may not be organized, whereas teaching provided in schools is well organized with predetermined objectives. As a teacher, you may be engaged in organizing many activities which take place within and outside the classroom. Inside the class, you may be delivering lectures, giving demonstrations, explaining concepts, conducting experiments, narrating stories, reciting poems, conducting role plays, etc. Similarly, outside the classroom, you may be taking students for field works, organizing sports activities, organizing exhibitions, etc. Do all these activities being performed by you constitute teaching? What does then teaching mean? Pedagogically, what is its nature? Answers to these questions are being discussed in the coming subsections. 1.3.1 Concept of teaching. As a teacher, you may teach, train or instruct others. All these refer to the processes meant for bringing about changes in the cognitive structure of knowledge in one's mind, in those who are being taught. However, they differ significantly in their meanings. Training involves preparing someone to do a job. It describes learning that takes many years to complete. Training involves a relatively systematic attempt to transfer knowledge and skills from one who knows to someone who does not know. Instruction, on the other hand, although often used synonymously with teaching, it has more to do with the development of skills rather than education in a broader sense. Unlike training and instruction, teaching refers to the actions of someone who is trying to assist others to reach their fullest potential in all aspects of development. It involves physical, mental, emotional, social, moral, and spiritual development of learners. Teaching is a process of attempting to promote changes in the learners. As noted, although training, instruction, and teaching differ in their meanings, the central process that runs through all of them is learning. As noted above, teaching refers to the actions of someone who is trying to assist others to reach their fullest potential in all aspects of development. Teaching would result when the teacher indulges in any activity with the intention that pupils would learn something as a consequence of it. For example, when a teacher explains to her/his pupils a scientific principle, a procedure for solving an arithmetic problem, or a technique to memorize a chemical formula, learning occurs through the process of teaching. She/he anticipates that her/his pupils would learn the principle, procedure, or technique, and teaching would occur. Teaching also would result when the teacher prescribes tasks such as reading a passage, writing of a composition for pupils to engage in for the purpose of learning. Thus, in either case, be it directly through the face-to-face interaction or indirectly from the books, films, or instructional programs, teaching can occur. However, when we think of teaching, we generally have in mind the teacher-student interaction in the classroom. As compared to teaching, instruction is a much broader concept. Instruction subsumes both teaching and classroom management. They are so well integrated that it is difficult to differentiate one from the other. A question that the teacher puts across the class, for example, is an act of teaching, while restricting its answer to a single student and avoiding confusion in the class is part of management. Similarly, recognizing pupil attention behavior, gaining maximum pupil involvement, managing deviant behavior, recognizing pupil needs, displaying enthusiasm, etc. that occur along with the teaching, are all part of classroom management. Quality instruction involves efficient and effective use of both management techniques and teaching methods. So teaching and classroom management go so hand in hand that it is difficult to separate one from the other. By now, we have attempted to describe the concept of teaching. Now let us look at the nature of teaching. 1.3.2 Nature of teaching. As we have already seen, teaching is a process that involves a series of actions leading to certain outcomes. Teaching, like any other concept, involves certain characteristics. We highlight some of the important characteristics of teaching in the forthcoming subsections. Teaching is both science and art. Teaching, as a process, has characteristics of both art and science. It is a practical art and not a fine art aimed at creating beauty for its own sake. It requires improvisation, spontaneity, handling of hosts of considerations of form, style, pace, rhythm, and appropriateness that even computers fall behind. Effective teachers have natural instincts for teaching. It is these instincts that make their teaching unique. Good teaching, apart from being a creative art, is also a science that requires a good understanding of principles of teaching and a deep knowledge of the subject matter. It also offers specific methods and skills that are attainable. As a result, good teachers are able to transform knowledge into learning activities that motivate students to learn. 2. Teaching is complex. Teaching uses all sorts of techniques, methods, and media. Teaching makes use of various techniques or skills such as questioning, probing, exemplifying, etc. It also makes use of various methods or models of teaching depending upon the nature of the content being taught, objectives to be accomplished, and readiness of the learners to learn. Teaching also makes use of such media as audiovisual media, human interaction media, print media, realia, electronic media, etc. Success in teaching, to a great extent, depends upon selection and use of appropriate techniques, methods, and media. 3. Teaching visualizes change in behavior. As teachers, when we teach, we have some expectations as to what changes would happen in the behavior of the learners. These changes can be in the cognitive, knowledge, psychomotor, skills, and affective, attitudes, values of the learners. The changes that take place in the behavior of learners as a result of learning should be tentatively permanent. The changes that occur in learners need not be performative but be potential ability of the learners. 4. Teaching can be direct or indirect. While teaching, teachers may resort to either direct or indirect ways of teaching. As the teachers use such methods as lecture, demonstration, etc. and engages students in face interaction, they are teaching them directly. Conversely, when they use active methods like role play, project, assignment, inquiry or other such activities, they are teaching them indirectly. As teachers, we ought to know that teaching them indirectly is a better way of teaching as compared to teaching them directly. In indirect ways of teaching, students are at the center. As a result, they are actively involved in the process of learning. This gives them chances for better understanding, which leads to greater retention. Teaching can be vertical or horizontal depending on the objectives of teaching. Teachers may lead students deep into the topic. They not only help students know and understand the topic but teach them higher-order thinking skills like analysis, synthesis, evaluation and creating. This type of teaching is known as vertical teaching. Conversely, if the teachers teach one topic and then move on to more and more topics, they are resorting to horizontal teaching. In that case, their teaching covers more areas spreading over several topics instead of going deeper into one topic. Teaching may be planned or unplanned. Traditionally, teachers plan for instruction before they go to the classroom for teaching. In the beginning of the academic year, they resort to yearly planning in which different units in the textbook are distributed judiciously throughout the year. Thereafter, they take up each unit, subject it to content analysis, task analysis, decide the techniques and methods to be used for teaching. Then they decide the ways of evaluation. However, with the coming of active learning methods, no strict planning is possible as one is not clear in advance what could be the possible way of organizing teaching learning activities. By now, we have discussed what teaching is and what its main characteristics are. This awareness about teaching and its nature would help us in a big way in handling teaching in a better manner. 1.3.3 Teaching as facilitation of learning. Teaching is traditionally seen as an attempt to bring about desirable changes in the behavior of the learners or their cognitive structure. To accomplish this, teachers analyze and organize the content they are to teach, decide the objectives for teaching it, select the appropriate methods and even the techniques for evaluation. Everything pertaining to teaching is done by teachers and learners have practically no role to play. They are simply to listen, understand and retain knowledge and skills that teachers focus while teaching. In this type of direct teaching using such methods as lecture or demonstration, students are mostly passive, as there are less changes for students for focusing, understanding and retention. Since 1980s, with the advent of constructivist approach to learning, a new way of looking has come to prevail. The constructivists view learning as personal and hold that every individual is responsible for his or her own learning. In this perspective, individuals learn as a result of doing activities or undergoing experiences. In this process, the incoming new knowledge and the prior knowledge of the learner pertaining to the topic get integrated and as a result, knowledge and skills are constructed. Teachers' role is only to guide or facilitate the act of learning of students. In learner-centered method of teachings, be they role play, discussion, cooperative learning, inquiry or discovery, teachers do not stand in front of the class unlike teaching students through expository methods of lecture and demonstration. They enable students to learn. As students at the elementary level are not that mature, they need a lot of assistance in the progress of learning. They need assistance of teachers at every step of their learning. If students are to get best results, activities and experiences should be accompanied by systematic analysis and reflection. So, teachers' assistance is inevitable at every step of their learning. By way of facilitation, teachers are expected to perform a number of tasks at the pre-instructional, during instructional and post-instructional stages. As experiential learning involves learners to learn on their own, teachers have to gather in advance all the required resources such as materials, texts, worksheets, etc. so that students can learn on their own without any interruption. Teachers also have to select appropriate contents, activities or issues in consultation with students looking into the relevance and interests of students. In addition, they have to decide in advance the objectives of doing the activities or undergoing the experiences and the procedure to be followed, and the like. In case the method chosen for the purpose is something like discussion or cooperative learning, teachers have to think in advance about dividing the class into groups. They have to decide whether the grouping should be homogeneous or heterogeneous. Teachers also have to provide, during pre-instructional tasks, instruction as to what students are expected to do while working in learning teams. They also have to fix the time limit for completion of particular activity, fix dates and time for discussion or presentation. They also have to decide the evaluation procedures to be followed after each activity. During the process of teaching learning, teachers have to guide them through various steps in the method being used. If the method chosen is discussion, for example, teachers have to convey the objectives of holding the discussion, get the student ready to participate in the discussion and focus the discussion. As the discussion progresses, teachers have to monitor, enforce the ground rules, keep records of the points raised and even add their ideas at appropriate places. As the discussion comes to an end, they have to end it and debrief it, in which they have to get the students look at the discussion analytically. Teachers have also to do some post-instructional tasks. Once the activity is over, teachers have to encourage students to analytically go through it and reflect over it. They have to help students find out what went right and what went wrong, and what their strengths and limitations are, etc., and also have to give required feedback for improvement. In short, teaching is not seen as marking the empty slate or filling the vessels with knowledge and skills. Teachers' main role is not to expose learners to knowledge and skills through lectures or demonstrations, but to facilitate or guide the learners in the process of learning. 1.3.4 Relationship of teaching with learning and learner. If you closely examine, you will soon find that there is close relationship between the way teachers teach and the extent to which learners learn. Teaching, like any other practical art, may be performed dexterously or awkwardly, professionally or amateurishly, competently or ineffectively, intelligently or stupidly. Successful teachers have a large number of techniques and methods in their repertoires, and they always select the most appropriate way of looking into the nature of content to be taught, the objectives to be accomplished, and the readiness level of the learners whom they are teaching. They have their unique style of teaching and managing their classroom. Learning, however, does not totally depend on teaching alone. A number of learner factors can also impact learning. Let us discuss the relationship of teaching with learning and learners. 1.3.5 Relationship of teaching with learning. Student learning depends on the quality of teaching to a great extent. Successful teachers know that students pay attention to what they teach. Students perceive only when teaching is relevant and interesting. If students realize that what teachers teach are irrelevant, they are unlikely to pay attention to it. Similarly, if they perceive what is taught is dull and uninteresting, they are unlikely to pay attention to We know that what students learn now are not for today only, but also for the future. Their time in the classroom is not to be wasted on useless pursuits. So teachers need to realize that what they teach in the classroom should be something that is not only useful to them in the future, but also it should be taught in such a way that they are able to remember it for a long time to come. This is possible only when teachers select contents and learning activities judiciously. When students perceive that what the teacher teaches is both useful and interesting, then they concentrate on it, and as a result learning takes place. Experienced teachers know that learner-centered methods of teaching provide better scope for active participation of students. When students are actively involved in the teaching-learning process, they are bound to concentrate on it. Concentration leads to better understanding, and what is understood is easily retained by learners. Realizing this fact, if teachers give up the habit of teaching them through lectures or demonstration and resort to learner-centered methods of teaching, better learning is bound to happen. The more learner-centered methods are used for teaching, the higher will be the learning outcomes. Realizing this, instead of using expository methods like lecture or demonstration, teachers should use student-centered methods like discussion, cooperative learning, role-playing, assignments, projects, etc. The more is the student involvement, the higher will be the learning outcomes. Another important way to bring about higher learning is the practice of using stimulus variation. If teachers go on using day after day the same method for teaching, students are likely to get bored. When they are bored, they naturally find it difficult to concentrate. To overcome this problem and to make learning more pleasurable, teachers should master a number of techniques and methods. In case they do that, they can make their teaching interesting by resorting to a number of techniques as they teach. They may, for example, introduce a topic through a discussion, which in turn may be followed by a description and then by question-answer, etc. They may also use a number of media like audiovisual media, human interaction media, realia and the like. With the incorporation and use of different media and techniques, learning will become more joyful. Learners would find it easy to concentrate, and with it, better learning would result. Teaching and learning, as we have already seen, are indisputably interlinked. A little extra care on the part of the teacher can bring in a better classroom climate, which can generate greater learning outcome on the part of the learners. 1.3.6 Relationship of learners with learning. Just as certain aspects related to teaching can make differences in learning, similarly certain traits and personal qualities of learner can also bring about differences in his/her learning. Certain qualities and traits of learners, such as their level of intelligence, their attitudes, their motivation, their learning styles, aptitudes, their readiness to take risks, etc., can impact the way they learn. Intelligence of learners is one of the reasons for their differences in learning. As for intelligence, there are no two persons who are the same. It differs from person to person. Some are highly intelligent. Others are average or low in their intelligence. Intelligence is linked with capacity to think, to reason logically, to make decisions, to solve problems, etc. Those who are intelligent or gifted, as compared with those who are average or low, can see through things and learn things easily. They can cope with learning much better than those who are average or dull. Intelligence and learning, therefore, are closely linked. Attitude of the learners is yet another trait that can make differences in the rate of learning. Attitude towards learning here refers to tendency of the learners to respond either positively or negatively to learning. If learners like the subject and the way the teacher transacts learning experiences pertaining to it, they are likely to have positive attitude towards the subject being taught. In case students like a subject and the way the teacher teaches it, they are tended to pay more attention to what is being taught. They are willing to spend the required time and energy for learning it. They begin to actively participate in the learning process. As a result, they are able to build up more knowledge and skills. Conversely, those students who have a dislike for the subjects are not likely to pay attention to teaching. As a result, they score poorly. This shows that the attitude of learners towards learning makes difference in their learning. Motivation of students is another factor that shows up in their learning. A need or a motive is something that impels a person into action. This driving force can also come out of a desire or even from an emotion. It is motivation that drives things forward. If learners have a worthy goal in mind and a burning desire to accomplish it, motivation would automatically arise. Achievement motivation is a powerful driving force for learning. The main characteristics of motivation are energy, determination, willingness to work, dedication, and commitment. When learners are motivated, nothing can stand in their way of accomplishments. Such learners would be willing to spend hours to learn. On the other hand, those learners who are not motivated would easily give up when they are confronted with setbacks. Just like intelligence, attitude and motivation, there are other factors like the cognitive style of the learners, their preferred way learning, their reflectivity, ability to reflect upon, readiness to take risks, courage to venture out into new areas, divergent ways of thinking rather than convergent ways, their personality dispositions such as introvertedness or extrovertedness, their self-esteem, etc. can impact their learning. Similarly, the mental state of learners can also impact their learning. If they are emotionally disturbed, physically tired, they find it difficult to learn. In sum, the way teachers teach and the extent to which learners learn are closely related. Similarly, if learners perceive teaching as good, relevant, and interesting, they are made to actively participate in the teaching-learning process, and there is sufficient level of stimulus variation in teaching, learners would find learning joyful and they would learn. On the other hand, if they find teaching teacher-centered, and there is no scope for their active participation, learners may not be motivated to learn. In the absence of concentration, learning will suffer. 1.4 Learner-centered approach to teaching learning. There has been a trend since the 1980s and 1990s towards individuals taking more responsibility for their own development. The thinking that children's brains are blank slates to be written upon or empty vessels to be filled up was found to be pedagogically not sound. Learners are active and need to use and test ideas, skills through relevant activities. Instead of spending time memorizing materials, filling in the blanks, repeating similar problems, students should solve novel problems, integrate information and create knowledge for themselves. Teachers should encourage them to use active techniques to create more knowledge and then reflect on and talk about what they are doing and how their understanding are changing. Teachers should also know their pre-existing knowledge and guide the learners to build on the existing knowledge. They should help students assess how learning activity helps them in gaining understanding. 1.4.1 Meaning and characteristics of learner-centered approach. Learner-centered approach to teaching and learning, as noted above, is activity-based. It focuses on student needs, interests and activities. In its present form, learner-centered approach operates with students as the center of learning. Activities for learning are planned jointly by teacher and students. Teacher is stimulator and facilitator of student activities. He or she employs such techniques and methods as discussion, debate, role play, cooperative learning, inquiry, games and other devices and activities for actively involving students in the classroom. Teachers always strive to look for activities that can usher in greater student involvement. As students are engaged in the whole process of learning, they come out with their own findings. They are made to look for links among things they discover. They make conscious effort to sense and find meaning in what they learn. Characteristics of learner-centered approach. As we have already noted, learner-centered approach to teaching and learning is carried out through the involvement of students into various activities. In the process, learners construct their own knowledge and skills. Student-centered approach to teaching learning, as in the case of other approaches, is marked off by a number of characteristics. Examples of learner-centered approach are project work, activity-based learning, peer tutoring, field trip, group discussion, role play, drama, etc. Learner-centered approach to teaching learning, as in the case of other approaches, is marked off by a number of characteristics. Some of these characteristics are as follows. Learner-centered approach is centered on learner needs. It is centered on cooperative determination of subject matter. It lays emphasis on variability of exposure. It lays emphasis on skills. It lays emphasis on immediate meaning of learning. It lays emphasis on indirect strategies. If we examine the above characteristics of the learner-centered approach to teaching learning, we can soon find that its characteristics are just opposite to those of teacher-centered approach. While learner-centered approach focuses on learner needs, teacher-centered approach focuses on subject matter. While learner-centered approach lays emphasis on variability of exposure, teacher-centered approach lays stress on uniformity of exposure. While learner-centered approach advocates learner control strategies for teaching, teacher-centered advocates teacher control strategies for teaching. 1.4.2 Integrating children's voices and experiences in teaching learning process. Children's ideas and opinions contribute significantly to the teaching learning process. As all of us know that they come to class with a lot of prior experiences pertaining to different subject areas. While teaching different contents, we must utilize their prior experiences in the teaching learning process. Moreover, their voices in the transaction of learning experiences need to be respected. Research shows that when students are involved in the goal setting, their commitment increases. If they are included in deciding the goal of teaching, they tend to engage themselves more in goal-directed activities. On the contrary, if teachers set goals for students, they are more likely to give up, as they perceive them as teachers' goals and not theirs. Involving students in all matters in which they are concerned in the classroom is one of the crucial ways through which teachers can generate commitment. If teachers wish to get full commitment and cooperation of students, they should involve them in open communication and make them participate in decision-making and goal-setting. Teachers also need to realize that dependence breeds hostility. If teachers wish to reduce hostility, they should provide children with opportunity to experience independence. The more the autonomy, the less the enmity. The more the self-dependence, the less the resentment. One of the ways to diminish hostility is to give student a voice and a choice in matters related to life in school. Self-inferred decisions decrease defiance, reduce resilience and invite collaboration. Experienced teachers would give students opportunity to experience maximum possible autonomy and participation. Wherever feasible, they also would use the ideas, suggestions and opinions expressed by students so that they feel their input is valued. By using modalities such as these, experienced teachers would lead them to greater motivation and better accomplishments. 1.4.3 Children's active participation in classroom activities. Learning requires active participation of students in the classroom. The more they are involved, the greater would be the possibility of their concentration. As they closely interact with teachers, they understand what is being learned. What is understood is easily internalized and learned. So active participation on the part of students is very crucial for learning. The more active learning techniques teachers use, the more is the extent of knowledge and skills they are likely to build up. When teachers provide students with opportunities to approach learning as acts of discovery or inquiry, they engage themselves increasingly in learning with the autonomy of self-reward. This serves as stimulation and helps students maintain their own alertness. Providing opportunity for doing things that learners enjoy makes them motivated. So teachers should structure their teaching in such a way that students become totally involved and acquire learning experiences which enable them excel both in academic as well as social learning. Teachers can also make their lessons interesting for students by relating materials to students' lives, by making them vivid and novel, by using games, puzzles and other activities which are inviting. Similarly, by organizing a variety of activities such as field trips, stimulation, role-playing, music, guest lectures, and by switching on and off to different instructional techniques, methods and media, teachers can keep the interests of the students alive. Knowing one's subject and one's students, an imaginative teacher can do much to make teaching appealing to students' interest. He or she begins from what students already know and taking clues from their curiosity, their ambitions, their problems. He or she should show them how he or she relates to what is studied in school. Slowly and steadily, he or she would make students understand how such study can provide answers that lead them to more satisfying lives in future. Teachers can also actively involve students in the teaching-learning process through the use of a number of active learning methods. Some of these activities which teachers could use in the classroom are as follows: asking questions, especially those of the open-ended type, getting students summarize what is being learned, putting the newly learned information into pupils' own words, relating the information to their prior knowledge, getting them solve problems, discussing with peers and others who are knowledgeable, transforming the newly learned data into graphs, charts and tables, notes-taking and notes-making, applying the knowledge learned into novel situations, etc. In this way, by resorting to learner-centered methods like discovery, inquiry, etc., selecting activities students like, relating materials to students' lives, using active learning methods, teachers can make students active participants in the teaching-learning process. 1.5 Concept and nature of learning. As teachers, we need to have some basic understanding of what learning means. We will be confused and uncertain in our role as teachers if we are not clear about what learning is and what it involves. Learning can be best understood as a word which describes a change in an individual's range and repertoire of behavior. It is the process by which behavior is modified either by the addition of new and different abilities or by the extension and enhancement of those abilities which an individual already possesses. For example, learners at primary level know addition in mathematics. When they are taught subtraction, their ability to add now gets enhanced with ability to subtract. 1.5.1 Concept of learning. Most psychologists perceive learning as a relatively persistent change in an individual's potential behavior due to experience. According to this definition, learning mainly involves three aspects, namely, I. Some relatively permanent change in the learner's behavior. 2. The change may be in the potential rather than necessarily in the actual performance. And 3. The change must come about as a result of experience. The change that occurs in individuals owing to learning may be felt in their existing cognitive structure, indicative of intellectual growth, development of newer life skills, methodological skills, attitudes, interests, etc. Thus, owing to learning, changes are experienced in an individual's cognitive, affective and psychomotor domains. If we look back, we can see that the concept of learning has not been the same throughout for the last 100 years. Three schools of thought have been found prevailing during these years. These schools are I. Behaviorist school of thought, 2. Cognitive school of thought, and 3. Constructivist school of thought. I. Behaviorist school of thought. The school of thought that remained dominant in the first half of the 20th century was that of the behaviorism. The behaviorists gave focus only to those behaviors that can be observed and measured. They believed that learning is nothing but a stimulus-response reinforcement process. When learners respond to the stimulus, if they are reinforced, their responses would get strengthened. So the behaviorists believed that learning is a response-strengthening process. For example, when a teacher asks students a question in environmental sciences and the student responds correctly, then he or she rewards the student by saying excellent or very good. This acts as reinforcement to the student's response, which gets strengthened. 2. Cognitivist school of thought. As the behaviorists did not pay any heed to the inner processes involving learning and paid attention only on observable aspects, a new school of thought known as cognitivist came up. The cognitivists believed that every subject, discipline, has a structure, and when information is presented in an organized manner through lecture or demonstration, learners would acquire knowledge and skills. The cognitivists believed that learning is nothing but acquisition, assimilation and accommodation of knowledge and skills in the cognitive structure. 3. Constructivist school of thought. The constructivists believe that learning is not that passive as the behaviorists think. They began to consider learning as personal and that everyone constructs his or her own knowledge and skills as a result of undergoing experiences. The knowledge the learner gets from experience and the prior knowledge he has related to it gets integrated, and as a result, new knowledge and skills are constructed. So constructivists believe that learning is nothing but construction of knowledge and skills as a result of undergoing new experiences. More details about the schools of thought on learning will be discussed in Unit 2. As our discussion above shows, the concept of learning has been steadily undergoing a conceptual change over the years. It has never been static. Let us now look at the nature or characteristics of learning. 1.5.2 Nature of learning. As in the case of any other process, learning is also characterized by certain features. As educators of prospective teachers, it is advantageous to know that the nature and characteristics of learning. It is a complex process, and so it has several features that need to be known. Some of the important characteristics of learning are as given below. Learning is complex and involves all sorts of things as knowledge, skills, insights, values, attitudes, and habits. Learning may be planned or unplanned. Learning can be triggered by any experience, failure, success, and anything in between. Learning can be active as well as passive. Learning is individual and can also be collectively generated in groups. Learning is both a process and an outcome. Learning may be incremental, adding cumulatively to what has previously been learned or transformed. Learning outcomes can be undesirable as well as desirable. Learning has a moral dimension. Learning is lifelong. Learning is, as it can be noted from the above list, multifaceted. It is complex, planned or unplanned, conscious or unconscious. It can be incremental, cumulative or transformational. It can be guided or independent. Learning is also lifelong. 1.6 Learning, development of knowledge, skills and attitudes. Teaching is an attempt to bring about desirable changes in the behavior of learners. As a result of teaching, be it teacher-centered or learner-centered, learning would occur. Learning is the never-ending process of becoming different from what we were. The main function of education is to equip learners with the required knowledge, skills and attitudes that are essential for leading life in the society effectively and efficiently. If left to themselves, people will not be in a position to pick up all the knowledge and skills they require. So, with a view to facilitating the development of knowledge, skills, and attitudes, organizations such as schools and colleges are set up throughout the country. Attempts are made to study what individual and societal needs are. It is these needs that guide us as to what the objectives and goals of education should be. Once the objectives and goals are clear, we select and organize the content matter or learning experiences accordingly. The total list of learning experiences, including those of physical education, arts, painting, etc., are known as curriculum. The curriculum, in turn, is broken down in terms of subject areas. The list of items in each subject is called syllabus. Syllabus provides subject-wise learning content or learning experiences. Using syllabus as guidelines, textbooks are prepared. Teaching learning is mainly carried out in the classrooms with the help of textbook. Each textbook has a number of units or chapters. Each unit has a number of subunits in the form of lessons containing the learning matter and connected learning experiences and activities. During the transaction of the content matter and organizing various activities, students get the opportunity to acquire knowledge, skills and attitudes. As a result, students are able to get information, do activities and develop attitudes which they were not capable of earlier. The task of educating the young is simply too important and complex to be handled entirely by someone who lacks expertise in teaching. Modern societies staff their schools with expert teachers to provide instruction. Teachers are expected to use the best practices to help students learn essential knowledge, skills and attitudes. It is no longer sufficient for teachers to employ teaching practices based solely on intuition, personal preferences or conventional wisdom. They need to use teaching practices that have been shown to be effective. Only when teachers employ the most appropriate modalities for teaching learning, students will be in a position to acquire the requisite knowledge, skills and attitudes. 1.6.1 Development of knowledge. Studies carried out by cognitive psychologists like Bruna and Bell found that each discipline has a structure consisting of key concepts that define the discipline. They argued that when knowledge is organized systematically and presented to students using expository methods such as lecture or demonstration, they will understand it easily. Expository methods are those methods through which learning experiences are presented to learners by teacher in finite form. Learners are to receive learning experiences from the teacher as presented by him/her. If the content is organized logically, they easily fall into patterns. It is these patterns that give meaning. What is meaningful is easily understood and as a result, it is easily internalized and retained by learners. Teachers involve students into various activities and experiences so that they will be able to acquire the required knowledge. They need to know language, mathematics, sciences, etc. They also need to know about physical education, value education, etc. In fact, students need to be equipped with all sorts of knowledge to bring about their all-round development. In helping students acquire knowledge, we should not be satisfied with just introducing them to the level of knowledge, understanding and application. We need to take them to the higher levels of cognitive abilities such as analysis, synthesis, evaluation and creating. Only when they have picked up critical thinking ability, analysis, creative thinking ability, synthesis, and evaluative thinking ability, the learner will be able to make decisions, solve problems and handle tasks with ease and efficiency. Knowledge has no meaning unless it is put to use. So while teaching, focus needs to be laid on what students can do with what they know. 1.6.2 Development of skills. Through the process of teaching learning, knowledge is not the only thing that we expect learners to develop. We also expect them to develop skills and attitudes. A skill is a learned activity that one develops through practice and reflection. 2. Be skilled is to be able to perform a learned activity well and at will. Each skill may consist of a number of sub-skills. It is these component skills that make up the overall skill. Lack of mastery in one of the sub-skills can affect what would otherwise be a good performance. You may, for example, have the potential to be an excellent essay writer. However, you may be very poor in structuring your ideas or using paragraphs. This may put hindrances in your becoming an effective writer. Skill, as an ability to perform something, includes proficiency, competence, and expertise in the activity. Skill refers to learning of psychomotor behaviors required in activities like riding a bicycle, driving a car, swinging a tennis racket, or even something like tying a shoelace. As practice of such skill continues, they become more efficient and can be performed with little conscious thought or recall. There are 3 stages in the development of an automated skill. These Stages are as follows. 1. Cognitive stage, following directions guided by declarative knowledge. 2. Associative stage, combining individual steps into larger units. 3. Automated stage, where the whole procedure can be accomplished without much attention. In the last stage, the brain process shifts from reflective to reflexive. When driving a car for the first time, for example, you get a lot of instructions from your trainer, which belong to cognitive stage, and you have to give a lot of conscious attention to your speed, putting your foot on the correct pedal, observing the surrounding traffic. Reflective, which pertain to associative stage. As you drive, the skills are procedural and they become more automatic as you get used to it. Reflexive, which is automated stage. Although learning a new skill involves conscious attention, skill performance later become unconscious and relies on non-declarative memory. Much of what we do during the course of a day, such as taking breakfast, reading newspaper, get to work, etc., are automatic. 1.6.3 Development of attitudes. As a result of learning, we develop not only knowledge and skills but also attitudes. Attitude is a mental state held by an individual which affects the way that person responds to events and organizes responses. Attitudes are commonly held to have three essential components or dimensions. I. A cognitive dimension, involving the beliefs and rationalizations which explains the holding of the attitudes. 2. An affective dimension involving the emotional aspects of attitude, such as likes, dislikes, feeling of distaste, and 3. A cognitive or behavioral dimension which involves the extent to which the individual are prepared to act on the attitude that they hold. Attitude refers to affective or emotional state of pleasantness or unpleasantness of the mind. Emotions help learning in two ways, namely, I. The emotional climate in which learning occurs, and 2. The degree to which emotions are associated with learning content. I. Learning climate. Attitude develops as a result of the perception of climate of the condition in which learners function. When learners feel that the people with whom they are interacting are genuine and that they are interested in their well-being, learners feel happy. They feel comfortable in the company of teachers and others, and as a result a good rapport come to prevail. This leads to effective interaction which results in learning. Depending upon how learners perceive about the condition in which they function, they turn out to be positive or negative. When they are positive and happy, endorphins are released in the brain. This produces a feeling of euphoria which makes their learning experiences pleasurable and successful. Conversely, if the learners are stressed and negative, cortisol is released which activates defense behaviors such as fight or flight. 2. Content and methods of teaching and attitude. Attitude is developed not only as a result of the perception of the climate under which learners function but also as a result of the content they learn and methodology being used. If the contents they learn are interesting, learners will develop favorable attitude towards it. Similarly, if teachers use strategies such as simulation, role-playing, journal writing and the like, students would develop favorable attitude towards learning. If learners' study experiences are pleasant, they are impelled towards continuing it. If unpleasant, they tend to avoid learning. In short, learners develop their attitude not only depending upon their perception of the condition under which they function, but also on the content being taught and the methodology being employed. For teaching by teachers. 1.7 Different ways children learn. As we have already noted, learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior as a result of undergoing experiences. The experiences we resort to for learning can take different forms. We learn as a result of experience, observation, exploration, experiment, etc. We learn something or other all the time when we are awake and alert. Our sensory organ keep on capturing and passing on information pertaining to everything which we pay our attention to. It would be quite beneficial to know what these different ways through which we learn. So an attempt is made in what follows to give a brief description of some of the important ways through which we learn. 1.7.1 Imitation. Imitation is one of several ways through which people learn. Children generally imitate their parents. Small girls generally take their mothers and small boys their fathers as role models. They try to imitate their parents in many things. Even adults are seen imitating others in several matters. Those who are not confident or assertive, for example, are seen looking for people who are confident and assertive. Once they find such people, they watch their behavior very closely and try to act the way they do. In course of time, as a result, those who are not confident or assertive are found to have turned out to be assertive or confident. They have learned to be assertive or confident as a result of imitating people who are assertive or confident. 1.7.2 Observation. Observation is another way to learn. Suppose we want to learn about the social behavior of chimpanzees. We have to go to their natural habitat, which happens to be the forests. There we observe them closely. As a result of observation, we would learn how chimpanzees behave when they are in groups. We take in details of their habits. Thus, as a result of observation, we gather details of the objects regarding the shape, size, color, etc. As these details of the objects we observe get organized, they fall into patterns giving meaning to the things observed. This leads to learning. 1.7.3 Experience. Learning is based on and follows from experience. Most things we know are learned through experiences. After having undergone an experience, if we reflect over it, with the help of a few questions, we will learn a lot out of it. Questions such as, what was the purpose of the experience? What did I learn out of it? What went right? What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Etc. As we pose questions such as these and seek answers to them, we learn a lot out of it. Undergoing experiences and their reflection over them is one of the best ways to learn. For example, while teaching cultural diversity, students may be taken to a local fair, mela, and exposed to experience various kinds of people, their dresses, food habits, etc. 1.7.4 Teaching. Apart from learning through imitation, observation and experiences, attending classes where experts are invited to teach is yet another way to learn. Teachers select a topic, subject it to content and task analysis, and expose students to the topic through lectures. The students listen to the lecture and as a result, they learn. 1.7.5 Instruction. Instruction is usually concerned with physical rather than cognitive skills. This system often involves demonstration with supporting explanation. The demonstrator demonstrates how some task is performed. The learners listen to the explanation and watch the performances. As a result, the learners acquire knowledge and skills. 1.7.6 Trial and Error. When an individual is confronted with a problem and is not sure of which option is the most appropriate, he or she may opt for the one that he or she thinks is the right one. If he or she finds that it does not work, he or she may go for another. This process continues until he or she arrives at the right solution. In this process of trial and error, he or she learns a lot. For example, learners at elementary level learn Mathematical puzzles through trial and error method. 1.7.7 Reflection. Reflection is an effective way to process information and learn. One who is reflective has a tendency to consider and deliberate alternative solutions to problems. Conversely, one who is impulsive has the tendency to respond spontaneously, without deliberation, especially in situations of uncertainty. One who is reflective uses cognitive powers such as reasoning and analyzing to make sense of things that he or she is required to do. In the process of reflection, he or she learns a lot. For example, while teaching the impact of deforestation, students may be asked to reflect upon the advantages and disadvantages of deforestation. 1.7.8 Experimentation. Conducting experiments is yet another way to learn. When we are in doubt, it is not always wise to rely on intuition and guessing. Our guessing may often go wrong. To get to know the reality, we have to resort to experimentation. As a teacher, for example, you may think that your students as a whole have positive attitude towards your ways of teaching and so they will come out with good academic achievement. Our thinking can be one thing and the reality may be another. In case we choose to conduct an experiment, we can certainly arrive at the reality. In the course of the experimentation, we learn several things. As we have seen, there are quite a number of ways through which we can learn. However, as learning can neither be observed nor measured, it is difficult to attribute specific instances of learning to particular methods. It is, therefore, reasonable to assume that learning job-related capabilities involve several methods in combination or sequence, which have a complementary and cumulative effect. Different methods and approaches have their distinctive characteristics and limitations. Our success in learning, to a great extent, depends on our ability to select the most appropriate method, not the best one, looking into the nature of matter to be learned and the objectives for which it is learned. 1.8 Summary. Teaching is an attempt to bring about the required changes in the cognitive, affective and psychomotor domains of learners. If teachers are to do their job with efficiency and effectiveness, they should have sound knowledge base not only in the content areas they teach but also in matters related to pedagogy. They ought to know what teaching is, what its characteristics are, how teaching is related to learners and their learning, what learner-centered approach to teaching learning is, how to integrate learner voices and experiences in the teaching learning process, as well as how to bring in active participation of students in the teaching learning process. Apart from understanding the concept and nature of teaching and other pertinent aspects related to teaching, teacher ought to know about learning and its specific nature. As a result of teaching, be it teacher-centered or learner-centered, learning takes place. As a consequence of learning, tentatively permanent changes occur in the cognitive structure of learners. They acquire knowledge, skills and attitudes. If teachers are to make the most of their teaching, apart from knowing the concept and nature of learning, they ought to know different ways through which children learn as well as all the pertinent aspects related to their learning. Only then, they will be able to carry out the act of teaching in the classroom at the optimum level possible. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.